Hello, and welcome to the Theological Family Ministry Podcast, a podcast for parents as well as children and youth ministry leaders. We are dedicated to showing how theological study and biblical application relate to the discipleship of children and youth. As always, we're hosted by Pastor Ben Palaz, the pastor of family and children's discipleship at Curtis Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia, and Tony Trusoni, the family and student pastor at Faith Family Church in Finksburg, Maryland.
Good afternoon, Ben. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Catching up from long weekend. We had some stuff here with our students. It was a good weekend, and so, yeah. How about you?
It was good. I've been a little disappointed lately, though, because the Orioles weren't able to keep Machado, our star player, and he went out west, and I think it will be a really, really long rebuild. I don't think we've signed literally anybody all off season.
Yeah, I haven't. Now that you mentioned, I haven't heard about the Orioles making any big splashes. Paying Bryce Harper $500,000 or something like that. So, yeah, it's it's been interesting that the amount of money, the guaranteed money those guys can pull in, and they can hit below the Mendoza line towards the end of that contract and still be raking it in.
Yes, they can. Yeah, it is ridiculous. They can hit terribly at the end of this contract. What do you think of that?
And they probably will.
Yeah, they will. What do you think of the Bryce Harper deal, though? Do you think that's a little too long?
That's a long time. I mean, he is young, so chances are I think they'll get the majority of his prime. But yeah, I don't think when he's was he 25 now?
Yeah, no, I think he's right around there. So 25 or 26. So. Yeah.
I mean, you got to figure till he's probably 34, 35, unless his body just breaks down. But
he's had a lot of injuries.
That's true. Yeah, I guess we'll see. I don't. I mean, it's just sort of the way the game works now. To get those big time guys, they want long-term security, and I guess teams are willing to fork out the money over the long haul for it.
Yeah, I was reading something that mistakenly said that Bryce Harper is now under contract for the longest of any major league player is under contract, which is not true. Do you know who is actually getting paid, is in a contract to get paid for the longest amount of time still?
Who?
Bobby Bonilla.
Stanton? It's probably not, but.
Bobby Bonilla. That old player. He's still getting.
Nice.
Yeah.
If Bobby's sitting back on the couch, I guess, or he could if he wanted to.
Yeah, I read he's getting paid, he's going to be getting paid for about the next 18 years. He's been getting paid for a while still, but he's going to continue to get a paycheck every year well past his retirement for about the next 18 years, which coincidentally is about the amount of time that churches have access to having kids in Sunday school, about 18 years. They can go up into the adult Sunday school, but we're over about that 18 years. So yeah, he'll be under contract for about the amount of time that will be over Sunday school of somebody that's just newly born in our nurseries. What do you think of that?
I think that's amazing. I just looked it up. Bobby Bonilla is 56 years old. I'm guessing he probably couldn't hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball anymore, but that's okay.
Probably not. So, well, with that mention of about 18 years, this is probably the weirdest and most stretched segue of all time. But, we're going to be talking about that 18-year period, and we're going to be talking about Sunday school during that 18-year period. And so I want to go ahead and ask you, Ben, what is Sunday school?
Well, it's the place where Jesus is always the answer to every question.
Amen.
I mean, that. But more seriously, it is Jesus is the answer. But basically, it's just a ministry of Christian education, of instruction. And they can take on different forms, but it's often done before a service, after service. But it's in some ways, considering the history of the church, we'll get into that in a minute, it's kind of new. I mean, towards the end it's about as old as America, so. Yeah. But America didn't invent it.
No, we did not. So, yeah, I want to be clear to listeners, because the term Sunday school has a lot of different definitions and different kind of churches. So there are some churches that that only have 1 hour that they meet on Sunday. And during the worship service, they have alternatives for kids that they call Sunday school. But that's not historically what Sunday school was. Instead, we're talking about what historically was Sunday school and has been Sunday school, at least in Baptistic circle, which is a more specific study that's given based upon sometimes demographics, based on age, sometimes based upon a topic that is done in an additional hour, in a second hour. That's why we're calling the podcast Sunday Second Hour. And so we're talking kind of around that now rather than around a worship service alternative. But I want to ask, did you go to Sunday school as a child or as a youth?
Yes, I did. Starting around 5 or 6, most weeks I was in Sunday school. Now my parents were divorced, and so it's every other weekend kind of thing. My one set of my parents did not regularly go to church, so those weekends I was not. But yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time in Sunday school, had some good teachers. I learned when I was in about 4th grade, because we also had the chance to give an offering in our Sunday school class. And I learned that you should not make change in the offering cash bag. That was something that would be in poor taste. And so I was rebuked by my Sunday school teacher. So how about you?
Okay. Yeah. So for me, as a kid, I think I went once. I've been told that I went once with my aunt and uncle. One time, when my parents were out of town, I was staying with them. And I'm sure I was a ruckus, to say the least, in that Sunday school class. And as a youth, so I did not go to Sunday school. I was involved in the church as a teenager. About 16, 17, 18, I was a Christian. And, it's embarrassing to admit it, but I didn't know that our church had Sunday school. I didn't know that Sunday school was a thing at the church until after I graduated high school. And then I was, I could have come to church early every Sunday. But I just didn't know. So I'm sure I could have checked. I mean, websites were in their early forms back then. But I could have checked a website or could have found some more information, but I just didn't know to ask. So I first went to a Sunday school. The first time I really went to Sunday school was in college. I first started to kind of experience it through a church that both you and I went to, Grace Baptist Church. Really for a shorter time through, Christian Missionary Alliance Church, but most of my first experience with Sunday school was at Grace Baptist Church in Toccoa, Georgia.
Okay, cool. So later to the game, but
yep, it's technically east of Nolly, Georgia, by the way.
That's right. It's on the edge there.
It is. So I want to ask. We are so big into equipping parents and the role that the parent has in discipling their children and youth. Do you think that we're anti-Sunday school, Ben?
Hey man, it's not in the Bible. Just burn it.
Amen.
Burn it at the stake. No, not at all. I mean, I wish that more of the kids at our church came to Sunday school.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love Sunday school. I think it's one of the most effective things that a church can do, and the discipleship of young people and even adults, in addition to the service. I think we can see success of many people that have grown up in Sunday school, have been so deeply rounded and had growth through Christ in Sunday school. But I do hate abuses of it. I will say that I hate the ways in which Sunday school can be moralism sometimes, how Sunday school can sometimes seek to usurp the worship service as the most important hour of discipleship on Sunday for children and youth. But I do love Sunday school. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, I would echo the things you said about some of the ways that Sunday school has been used in not so good ways. And yeah.
Now, is Sunday school as important as the worship service for minors or adults?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I will say, well, no, I don't. It's not just I don't think so. No. For tiny kids, it is hard to know what they're soaking in, what they're perceiving, how they're being shaped by it all. And part of that's because their ability to express it to you is not fully developed. In those cases, they may benefit more from interaction, instruction on their level. But at the same time, their parents need the worship service and that trickle-down effect that it has in the parents' life and then bringing it into their lives, their children. You can't fully measure that. And so I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's a good thing for even small children to be in the worship service. Now, I mean, I've got a son who's almost 2. He's not going to get a whole lot out of it. Now, he may say, oh, they do this every week, but I mean, he's not absorbing the message quite yet. So I don't think you want to make Sunday school a substitute for the gathering of the whole church.
Yeah, I think we can do both. And I think definitively it's not as important. I will say we've talked about pragmatism and about consumerism recently, and the pragmatist within me says, yeah, clearly Sunday school is more important than the worship service. And I think that's where most people come to that perspective, which many people do. I've known Sunday school teachers, I've known church leaders that have this perspective. But I think that if we say that Sunday school is more important than the worship service, even for minors, we effectively act as if we know better than the Bible's plan for our worship. And God knew humanity. God knew what we best needed, and God prescribed the worship service in the way that he just simply didn't for Sunday school. And I don't think he's accidental in that. I don't think it's accidental that God never thought of the great idea of having a time where third graders are separate and having their just intentional Sunday school time, and where 45-year-old moms are separate and having their intentional Sunday school time. I think those things are good, but I think that God clearly is not accidental in prescribing the worship service, but not requiring those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we have to be so careful that when we act like we know better than what's God's plan. But where did Sunday school come from?
Well, it was an opportunity to teach people to read using the Bible. I mean, it was a form of literacy training and stuff for working class families. It started in England in the 1780s from what I've seen. And pretty quickly it spread to the U.S. And in less than 100 years, it had become almost a standard thing in many churches and for most kids. Working class people were, even their children were working long hours, and the school was not really much of an option. And so there was a chance for them to have some training to learn to read and things like that. And they could use the Bible for it. And so it was a good evangelistic opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on in that. Some details I found out when I was doing a lot of study, actually a while ago, and then kind of researching it. So you're right, 1780s. In fact, most sources say William King might have been the first one to start a Sunday school around 1780. But this was so immensely successful that by 1785, there were, according to some studies in England, there were 250,000 people in Sunday school within 5 years of it coming about. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, I didn't realize it was that caught on that quickly.
Yeah. So, and like you said, it was for working kids, an evangelistic effort. It wasn't really, church kids were, in early times, were not active in using it. But at times, especially in the early years in England, it was discouraged that church kids would utilize Sunday school. It was, again, almost entirely evangelistic. But I was reading a study that said by 1920, though, things had evolved over that first kind of 140 years of Sunday school. And by 1920, it had become more of an inreach than an outreach. And that's kind of where we're at today, where Sunday school is more the greater discipleship, and more of the inreach towards our children, towards our youth, towards our adults even now, than it is an outreach-based ministry, which isn't a bad thing inherently. I think there's a beauty in what Sunday school has done, and there was also a different kind of beauty in what Sunday school was.
That's interesting. I did not know the depth on that. And I mean, even today, if it were much more evangelistic, I mean, there presents some problems. I mean, not even that long ago, people were going out in vans and buses, and people just, let the kids hop on. And I mean, you just cannot do that now, at least not in America.
No.
And so getting the people there presents quite a challenge.
Yes. Now, are there any biblical or theological basis for if we do Sunday school or not, or how we do it if we do Sunday school?
Well, like you said, Sunday school itself isn't mandatory, but instruction and training in the Bible